Happy 250th birthday, America. It's a hell of a milestone, and it's a pretty fascinating backdrop for a room full of people who deal in longevity, evolution, and code that stubbornly refuses to stop running the world. Lately, I've been reading the tech news, which is an exhausting hobby in 2026, and all anyone wants to talk about is the radical new paradigm of software development. The pundits are screaming from the digital rooftops that the era of traditional coding is over. They're calling it a revolution. They say we are entering a magical new age where we can finally program computers using natural human language. And I have to tell you, I don't quite see what the fuss is about. Using human language to program? Perl let me use nouns and verbs, singulars and plurals, and free-form input back in the late 1980s. I mean, I've been around Perl since its very first alpha releases in 1987. Seriously, while the rest of the computer science world was worshiping at the altar of a rigid, mathematical purism, forcing human brains to think like transistors, Larry Wall looked at silicon and decided to treat it like a conversation. Larry wasn't just a hacker, he was a linguist. And because he understood how humans actually communicate, he didn't build Perl out of constructs designed to sit closer to the metal. He built it out of constructs designed to sit closer to speech. Think about it. Our sigils aren't just random punctuation errors that throw off your syntax coloring. They're literal parts of speech. The $sign is a singular noun, a scalar. The @ sign is a plural noun, an array. We have conditional clauses that can sit at the end of a sentence because that's how humans emphasize points. We say, I'm going to the store if it stops raining. Perl lets you write code exactly the same way. More importantly, Larry baked a fundamental human truth directly into the interpreter. There's more than one way to do it. Tim Toti. It's not just a slogan, it's an acknowledgement that human context is messy, fluid, and beautifully varied. But 40 years ago, Larry was playing a game of chess against severe hardware limitations. He did what he could with the tech at the time to enable being fluent in Perl through practice, context, and discipline. Because of that linguistic depth, a beginner's Perl script looked like an entirely different language than the work of a master. What a novice could scratch together was utterly dwarfed by true Perl poets. People who understand the grammar, the idiom, the rhythm of the language so deeply that their code doesn't just execute, it expressed. It's impossible to talk about Perl's trajectory without acknowledging its role as the duct tape of the early internet. When the World Wide Web exploded in the 90s, Perl was the engine under the hood. It wasn't just a tool, it was the catalyst for the dot-com boom. I remember working with clients in Silicon Valley during that feverish era. Everyone was trying to build the future on the fly, and Perl's ability to manipulate text and connect desperate systems made the impossible seem suddenly trivial. It enabled a generation of engineers to move at the speed of thought, turning the chaotic digital frontier into a functional global economy. Now, let's fast forward to today. The times are shifting rapidly. We live in a world operating at hyperspeed. The reality of the modern tech landscape is that developers, especially the newer generations entering the workforce, simply do not have the time or the bandwidth to spend years mastering another deep, rich, highly nuanced language like Perl. The economic and cognitive demands are too high. But look at what happened while everyone was looking the other way. The hottest, most disruptive technology on our planet right now, large language models, operate entirely on probability, semantics, and context. We spent decades forcing humans to speak pure math. Now we have successfully, finally, forced the silicon to learn how to speak human. And luckily, we all possess a natural language already. The magic of modern LLMs is not that they're replacing the act of thinking. It's that they allow us to guide a computer through the pathways of problem solving without having to violently shift gears into a rigid coding mode. We can stay in the problem space. We can use our native vocabulary to shape logic, handle edge cases, and describe intent. The rest of the world thinks this is brand new, but for a Perl programmer, this is just returning home. We have been trained for decades to think about programming as an exercise in linguistics and context. We are uniquely wired to communicate with systems that operate on human expression because our foundational language was built on those exact same rules. So where does that leave us right here in the summer of 2026? It means we have a choice. We can look at the AI as a threat to our craft, or we can recognize it as the ultimate validation of our philosophy. If the future of computing belongs to AI models that must understand human nuance, then the data, the structures, and the logic we use to train them will need to be rich in linguistic structure and flexibility. And that is exactly what is happening right now within our own backyard. We aren't just sitting around letting generic, out-of-the-box AI hallucinate bad code. Look what is coming out of the Public Enrichment and Robotics Laboratories, the RoboPerl organization. They are building a brand new LLM called PerlGPT. And right now, as we sit here today, the team is actively generating the PerlGPT training corpus, with plans to lock it down over the next few weeks. This isn't just another generic API wrapper. It's a model engineered to fundamentally understand Perl's best practices, idioms, and architectures. We're taking the decades of wisdom accumulated by the Perl poets and using it to build a foundation, teaching the machine how to understand that unique contextual mindset. We aren't just teaching a system how to blindly match a regular expression. Through PerlGPT, we are teaching AI how to think with a deep, adaptable, and pragmatic philosophy that has kept this community alive and kicking for 40 years. As we celebrate a quarter millennium of this country, we look back at the history defined by the independence, adaptability, and the refusal to be boxed into rigid authoritarian systems. Perl shares that exact same DNA. The metal is always going to be there. The math is always going to be underneath. But the future of engineering belongs to those who can speak fluent intent. It belongs to the poets that can direct the machines, not through rigid constraints, but through masterful context. We were the first to realize that programming is just a specialized form of human expression. And when the rest of the world finally catches up to that realization, the Perl community isn't fading into the past. We're providing the blueprint for the future. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference and the reception.